Unspoken Issues.
So, yeah, we're getting into Soviet super soldiers tonight. This is the Unspoken Issues podcast. And I am not alone. I'm Jesse Starcher. And by golly, Dean Compton is here. He has joined me. We are discussing more comic books from the 90s, of course. Gotta welcome back from his small hiatus. Thought it was going to be a lot longer, but he is back. Darry, welcome back to the show, man. Are you ready to talk Soviet super soldiers tonight, buddy?
I am. I'm very excited. I didn't want to go away, and this of course is a book that I have never read, which I keep thinking there can't be another one I haven't read from the 90s, and here we are. So I'm very excited.
This is one that I actually bought off the rack because I remember seeing these characters in some Captain America. Some Captain America issues, and I'll talk about that here in a few moments. But Dean, you're the one that suggested it, so I want you to kind of tell us why. Why in the world? I mean, this is kind of like out of the blue, oddball kind of stuff, man. Tell me what's going on.
Well, first off, let me also welcome Darry back. I'd say that I missed him, but that wouldn't be true. I really missed him. So there you go. See, we're starting off with a little sap. Well, you bought it off the rack. I stole it off the rack. I remember stealing this from Walmart. Nice. I stole comic books from Walmart for like 2 years, and then I finally got caught. And
all right, hold on. Let me ask a quick question. Okay. Because the Walmart that we had down here, I should say, and I think you're west of me at this point when your life.
Southwest, yeah. I was in Arkansas. You were in Ohio. Right.
So I do not remember them carrying comics at all. What was it like? I mean, and then maybe it's just something I never noticed.
Of course, what was it like? They had Marvel girls like it was Nitro girls. Like, strutting down the aisle like, oh, here's the comic books. And you jumped into like a fucking vault of comic books like you were Uncle Scrooge, and you came up spitting out like panels.
All right. Okay.
No, for real. I don't know. Do you have any grocery stores that carry comic books like a Kroger?
Yeah,
or
like
something?
a Kroger.
It was very similar to that, except like they were like at the Walmart and it's really an honest question because a lot of people have like from the north for whatever reason the Walmarts did not carry them. You're not the first person who's told me this, but like you could get comic books in the magazine section. There was like a straight up and down rack by the toys. They also sometimes carried like 3-packs of comics. I got like a Superman 3-pack and Spider-Man 3-pack.
I've got some Spider-Man 3-packs still in the package. I got them at an auction, man. Yeah, nice.
Then every now and then there would be just random spinners. Like there was a spinner in the cereal aisle for a long time, and there was another one by the hardware, I want to say. So there's a lot of comics.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
And I mean, they would have all different things, like there was, this is the first time I saw Impact Comics, obviously the Soviet Super Soldiers. I'd started buying the Marvel cards at the same Walmart. So like the comic books started to get more attention. I'd become friends with a few people who were into them. So yeah, that's what it was like to get comic books at Walmart. Also, you could steal them.
I want to hear this story.
Well, I mean, I didn't have any money. I was very poor. And my parents, this is a sad story, honestly. They liked to do drugs. And what they liked to do was give us like $3 and drop us off at the super center. And so $3, they're like, listen, get a soda, but don't get anything else because I want you to be vagrant. You can abandon a child, but they can't be vagrant. They have to have $1. Fuck is that? Anyhow, so like you'd be there with like a lot of nothing to do. And I just started to like think about stuff. And I was like, I don't have much money. There's stuff here I like. I should figure out a way to take it. So one of the things I would start doing is I would like buy something, get the bag, and I would sneak the bag back in, and then I would like put a bunch of stuff in it. Then I would sneak the bag back past, and or I would put some up my shirt, or I would like leave some under something where like I would put it in, like a box that I bought or something, just different things. So that's how I stole. And I remember I got caught stealing a Hero Illustrated special when I was in 8th grade. I swear to God, I'm in the back seat of this cop car because Walmart's arresting me in public.
Oh.
And my mom's in the front. They call my mom. And this is really annoying to me, honestly. So I'm like, God, I'm going to have to deal with this for a while. I'm like, who gives a shit? And I still like $7 worth of comic books. Thank God. Crime wave stopped. And to be fair, I probably stole like $2,000 worth of comic books from them. But I don't know if they were listed, I mean, over time, but who cares? Right. I also stole a whole Marvel set of cards, Series 4, had the Venom fucking versus a Spider-Man hologram in it.
No shit. Yeah.
And so, like, I was in the back seat of that cop car, and the cop's, like, trying to give me the fucking bad cop routine. Like, this cop has the goatee, and it is 1994, so he's proud of him. He's like, what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, I planned to seek public office, which I really did at the time. I wanted to be like the president of the United States because I was a dumb kid. And my mom was in the front, like the officer started to say something else. She's like, no, that's really what he wants to do. He's not smart enough to you. So, but I picked the comic because I stole it. It's one of the first comic books I stole. I stole Wolverine Save the Tiger at the same time, which is like a collection of the first 10 Marvel Comics Presents. These were thick comics, so they cost more. I bought some comics.
Okay.
Nearly $1. These were like $3. That's all I had, and I couldn't be vagrant. No. So like, I stole these. I was interested in it because first off, this is still when I was a neophyte. And as y'all have talked about, you're trying to get all the information you can. Like, my God, these are a whole bunch of guys I don't know. On some level at this point, I would buy a comic book like this or choose it over like a Punisher comic book. Not because I thought I would like it more, but I needed to learn. I needed more information. Also, this is around the time, I think 1991 is the failed coup against Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. And then Yeltsin takes over. This is around the time that the Soviet Union splits up. I'm a massive geography, international affairs, political history dork. So I'm like, Soviet super soldiers. And that guy looks like Captain America. This motherfucker better find out what's going on, And so I was instantly attracted to it. And so I stole it. I read it like a million times when I was a kid. Forgot about it for a long time. When we started doing this stuff, I was like, hey, this is one issue. It's going to have a lot of guys in it. It's going to be genuine reactions from all of us, because, some like Darry hasn't read it before. You had it when you were young. I did. It's going to be interesting to see all that come together. And also, this is the comic book that I would put forth as the most goddamn useless you will ever see Steve Rogers, Captain America. It's amazing, and it has to be seen to be believed.
Yeah.
So I picked it for all those reasons. It's interesting politically, interesting in the Marvel Universe, interesting to me as a kid.
Having this issue, I read it way back when I got it. Remembered absolutely nothing from it other than the cover. But going on this journey, reading the issue, doing research for this podcast, man, have I learned a lot. Okay, so I'm going to cover a little bit about what I've got written down here.
I don't even remember seeing this thing on the racks. Granted, it's mid to late 1992, so I definitely wasn't looking at everything. But I definitely wouldn't have picked this up. That would have been the period of time where it's like, if it doesn't have Spider-Man on the cover, I don't know about this. I remember when someone bought me X-Force #1, and I was like, I don't know any of these characters. I'm not sure about that. And then that, of course, quickly changed. But back then, even if I had seen this, I probably would have skipped it.
What else do you need to know?
Yeah, it's still polybag, not opened, because he's just like, I'm not getting into this.
my copy of X-Force #1 is signed by Rob Liefeld. 3 of my friends who hated Rob Liefeld before it was cool to hate Rob Liefeld, and they hung it up in my LCS, and I got it back the day the store closed because they were going to toss it. I was like, no, I want that. I'm always going to think of you 3.
Right. That's right. Soviet Super Soldiers comes out, just like Darry said. It's November of 92, I believe, is the date that I had listed here. Written by Fabian Nicieza, art by Angel Medina, Javier Saltares on some of the art as well.
One thing I'll tell you that's funny is a couple years ago, I got the chance to interview Angel Medina, and I talked to him about this issue, and he was like, oh, man, I got far behind. I was trying to do too much, and they had to bring in Saltares to finish it. And I was like, yeah, but it was also like a crazy time in the world. And he goes, yeah, the wall was falling, and so was my deadlines, which is like one of the greatest lines I've like ever heard in my life. Angel Medina is a great guy. I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he'll pop in and say, he always has something funny to say, and incredibly talented. He goes on to do some great work with Spawn. He had done some Dreadstar. Really underrated for this time, honestly. Should probably be held in higher regard as a really, really great penciler of the 90s.
Let's go ahead. We'll do some very quick character introductions, just because there are a lot of characters in this. We have Ursa Major, which is a mutant who can turn into a 7'5" anthropomorphic brown bear. First appearance, Incredible Hulk 250 in May of 1980. Vanguard, who is a mutant trained by the KGB, ability to fly and possess an energy field that repels virtually all electromagnetic, kinetic, and gravitonic energy. I'm sure I'm pulling that from the MarvelFandom.com. His first appearance, Vanguard's first appearance, was Iron Man 109 from January of 1978. And then Dark Star, who is the sister to Vanguard and a mutant as well, with the power to manipulate the mysterious Dark Force, creating forms out of it. Similar, I put in here similar to Green Lantern. She could use the Dark Force to like make a big fist or something like that. I think at one point she uses it to slap down a helicopter or something. I can't remember, but
right. It's important to note too that like she manipulates the same material that like if Cloak like grabs somebody, they're going to like the dark dimension. I think Silhouette like traverses through it. There's a character named Darkling, I think, who came out. It's like a New Warriors villain who does stuff. There's a few others too, I believe. But like the Dark Forces dimension is like a thing in the Marvel universe.
Dark Star's first appearance, Champions number 7, May of 1976. Now, these three are important because I've got them listed as the defectors. So they left Russia and they defected to the United States. And then I'll kind of talk about what came before and why they are back in Russia at this point, the Soviet Union. The next up, so the Supreme Soviets. So this is your Avengers analog over from the Soviet Union. We've got Crimson Dynamo, who is Dmitry Bukharin. I want to go with that. Dmitry is the fifth to pilot the large Crimson Iron Man-esque armor in service of the Soviet military. First appearance of Iron Man 109, 1978. Then we got Sputnik. I almost would say he's like the Vision analog here, but he's a synthezoid. Sputnik was one of the founding members of the Supreme Soviet, serves as the team's supercomputer and can hold his own in battle. First appearance, Captain America 352 from April of 1989. Red Guardian, this is, I think, the third Red Guardian. I'd have to look that up to make sure, but this is Joseph Petkus, extremely... Good old Joe. Extremely skilled fighter, acrobat, and is in an extremely good physical condition. The Soviet Union's answer to Captain America. First appearance, Captain America 352, April of 1989. Another one from April of 1989, Captain America 352, is Phantasma or Fantasia. She goes by both. I had to look that up because I went back and read this arc that they're talking about that happened in the 350s of Captain America, and she's one or the other. And then in this issue, she's the other, whichever one it is. So she's Phantasma in one and Fantasia in the other. Phantasma/Fantasia, skilled in magic, especially in the use of illusions. She has also shown the ability to fly and certain mental abilities. Oh, and get this. She is also a dire wraith. Did you know that?
I did not.
I did not know that, but I did know that these guys messed around in ROM because I read ROM last year. The mutants and the Supreme Soviets play a significant role in one of the storylines.
So there you go. And then we have Perun, who is one of the Slavic gods of Eastern Europe and is the god of storm, thunder, and lightning. Very, very much an analog of Thor. First, believe it or not, First appearance, Captain America 352 from April of 1989. So as you can see, well, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4 of the Supreme Soviets got their first appearance there in that issue 352. And I don't know if you guys have seen the issue that I'm talking about. The defectors that I was talking about earlier are laying on the floor. And in one issue, the Avengers are surrounding them and it looks like they killed them. And then the next issue is the Avengers are laying on the floor, the Supreme Soviets standing above them. And then we have the Exiles. No, not those Exiles.
More of those Exiles.
More of those Exiles. They call themselves the Exiles, although I don't think that comes up here. That is what they are branded in some other comics, if I remember correctly. But anyway, we have Blind Faith, who is the Catholic priest who helps the Underground Railroad for mutants in Russia. As a mutant himself, he has the powers of telepathy. First appearance, X Factor Annual number 1, July of 1986. Stencil, this is her first appearance. Soviet Super Soldiers number 1. She has the mental powers to mind suck people, housing their consciousness in her own, but causes some split personality issues with her. However, she can use their skills. So she mind sucks you. She can use those skills to her advantage. Cybercat also appeared in that X Factor Annual number 1. He's a mutant with feline-like abilities, quick reflexes, sharp claws, and enhanced senses. Then we have Mentak, first appeared, X Factor Annual number 1, July of 86. A mutant with advanced brain capacity, Iron Curtain, same issue, first appearance as well. A mutant with superhuman strength and durability. Then we have Concussion, same first appearance as well. As you can see, these exiles were running around in X Factor Annual #1 for a little bit. Concussion has the mutant ability to shoot concussive blasts from his hands. All right, so there we go. Those are a big part of the characters in this story. Now, I have the antagonists listed here, and these are the people that are going to run up against all of our heroes, I guess you'd say, in this book.
Can I just say, though, like, Mintak's power, who cares, man? Like, I'm not trying to, like, be an asshole or anything, but, like, he's like, oh, man, I figured out that it'll take these people 5 days. You're a logistics expert. I have a calculator, so I'll figure out these big numbers.
Yeah.
Like, what's this deal? I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm not happy about what happened to him. Seems like a cool dude. Big deal. It's like when Superman used to say, oh, I use super mathematics. It's just fucking math, bro.
It's math, bro. So our antagonists here, the biggest one we're going to see that's kind of running, pulling the strings behind everything is Colonel General Valentin Shadilov. First appeared in Iron Man 255 from April of 1990. A military man with the goal of restoring the Soviet Union to the days of Stalin and currently using all of his resources to ensure this happens, including using them against anything he deems a threat to his vision. And then we have Firefox, Dean's favorite character. Firefox. First appearance, Soviet Super Soldiers #1, this very same issue. Cyborg assassin in service of the Soviet Union. Then we have Titanium Man. This guy's been around for a while. Tales of Suspense #69, June of 1965 is the first appearance. This is Boris Bulsky. Now, Boris piloted the massive green Iron Man-like armor and recently threatened a defector named Sergei. This is important. Recently threatened a defector named Sergei to develop a way of converting the armor into something as small as a credit card. However, it also converted the organics inside along with it until it was reactivated again. When Sergei finally fought back, Boris was converted into his own card formed with the armor, which Sergei then tore it apart. Bro tore it apart. So that's important because Crimson Dynamo is going to be searching for these pieces of Titanium Man, Boris, if you will. And then we have one of the strangest characters I don't think I ever even knew existed. Unicorn, Milos Masaryk, all right? Created by Stan Lee and Don Heck, first appeared Tales of Suspense #56, 1964. Milos was once an operative of the Soviet Union using modified super weaponry under the name Unicorn. However, over the years, due to certain experiments, even though his strength and stamina have reached superhuman levels, he has suffered from accelerated cell deterioration that has left him mad. At the opening of this story, the whereabouts of the Unicorn are unknown. So there we go. So to kind of set the scene here of what came before, Captain America 352 and 353, Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Dark Star were all serving the Soviet Union, Soviet government as the Soviet super soldiers at that point, but soon grew tired of the government's deception and lies. Defecting to the U.S., they sought asylum with the Avengers. However, the newly formed Supreme Soviets came looking for them, disguising themselves as the Avengers. After the battle, Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Dark Star are left in a catatonic state. And at the end of issue 352, in 353, suspecting Soviet involvement in the attack that left the defectors near death, Cap heads to Russia on a diplomatic mission. Once there, he meets the Supreme Soviets, but soon their attention is turned to a giant black bear attacking Russian cities and citizens. They quickly learn this is a projection created by the angry consciousness of Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Dark Star. Cap succeeds in convincing them that killing the Supreme Soviets is not the way to work this out. The bear disappears. Back home, the trio awakens, seemingly believe it all to be a dream. A shared dream at that. At the beginning of this issue, the Soviet government recently politically maneuvered the United States to return Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Dark Star to the struggling USSR, as they do not believe these three weapons should be anywhere on United States soil. So, Dean, I want to get to your point here, man. Captain America, pretty useless. I mean,
these guys are like, we did everything we could. He's like, I know. I'm like, if you listen to our Anarchy podcast, you know where I'm coming from here. It's emblematic of everything I hate about, like, liberal government. It's just utterly ineffectual. No matter what the right thing is, the rules are more important. They'll never break the rules. And if you can't get it to work, then what do you want me to do? I want you to throw your fucking shield at this, contraption and free these three people who do not deserve to go back to the terrible USSR. Like, you don't want any part of it. And honestly, this has to be the first time in American history where we like refused defectors from the USSR. What the hell? That's all we ever did. Like, look, we got this chess guy. We got this other guy. The Hunt for Red October. Speaking of the Hunt for Red October, this was a very sexy theme at the time. I think this book actually was started being written around 1990 and drawn and stuff. I think it was much earlier than when it came out. And like you're saying, in 89, the Berlin Wall is falling. You have Martin Gruenwald bringing contemporary events into the Marvel Universe, into his Captain America book. And that, again, that's one of the things that attracted me to this book, is I knew that the Soviet Union had broken up. I was like, Soviet super soldiers? It's not even the Soviet Union anymore. I just won the goddamn geography bee. What's this about? So I had to find out about. That's a shoot, by the way. I had won the geography. 4 straight years. Finished second in the state my 8th grade year.
Nice.
I'll never forget what the Labrador current is for the rest of my life. That's what I. So it's really neat to see those real world events play out in this kind of environment, because that's one of the things that I really like about superhero stuff, is I like to see real world concerns. And we can argue about whether it should really be the Soviet Union or some analog or whatever, but real world inter-geopolitical concerns are an interest of mine. And superheroes are an interest of mine, and you put them together here, and I find it to be terrific. You know, I mean, it's Captain America can't get anything done, and I think that's, like I said, it's emblematic of kind of what we have now with a government that can't do anything. It's like we see everything go to shambles around us. But Joe Biden does not have an indestructible shield, so Steve Rogers has less of an excuse.
Darry, I went through a whole list of characters there. Just give me a percentage of how many you heard of versus how many you never heard of.
We are below 50%, which is staggering, because when I started reading this book this morning, I really thought I would recognize more of these characters, but Nastasia went in, grabbed everyone who had a Russian background, and not only put them in a single book, but furthered every single one of their stories. Like, if you had,
or he murdered them,
or just murdered them for the better of one of the other characters. But I mean, you know, we think about stories today that tend to be a little bit more decompressed. You don't necessarily get a lot for your dollar, but this thing was a great buy in 1992. You got a full storyline for like a dozen characters. But yeah, I got to say, I didn't recognize most of them, and I had to read it a few times because the names weren't landing for me. So I would see Mikhail or Joseph or something like that, and I'd really have to focus, like, who is that here? And like, really having to focus on the book that much was kind of fun, because it was like, I know you're in the Marvel Universe. I know Dark Star is an X-Man, but past that, it's like, I really don't know any of these characters. So it was kind of, it was fun. It was like discovering a whole new team, I guess.
I honestly identify with what you're saying there, because that was one of the reasons why I kind of started writing I mean, I knew it was going to be important for the podcast, but it also helped me understand who these characters were and what they were bringing to the table and what came before. I had to do a little bit of research. I could tell you that if you drop this on somebody that had no idea what came before, they might be a little lost. We'll just put it that way. It's a good story set out on its own, but it'd be nice to know what happened, a lot about what happened before. I didn't know why.
Were you lost, though? Like, you bought this off the rag, and I stole it off the rag.
Well,
and one of the reasons I stole it is what Darry said. This was there's a lot going on here. I would reread this like 100 times. I think I actually pulled the cover off and like pinned it to my wall as like a pinup. Like the only Soviet super soldiers fan in, like, I don't know, all of Arkansas.
Yeah.
But like, how did you keep up at that time? I mean, because like, to me, you definitely had to get it. But like, once I read it like 3 times, I felt like I was an expert on all things Soviet in the Marvel Universe. What about you, Jesse?
I mean,
you read it then.
Yeah, I did, but again, I don't know if I can answer it because I honestly forgot what happened in here. So I don't know what my reaction was at that point.
If you'd stolen it, you'd remember more about it.
You're probably right. If you don't have a whole lot of history with some of these characters, you may not know a lot of specifics, and you're going to want to learn more about it. That's a good thing too. I mean, you don't have to know everything going into a comic. I think nice.
When you're younger, like we were when we got this too, like I said, I'm really looking for that. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, there was so much already that, like, maybe if you already knew about the Marvel Universe, you'd already been or more about it than we did. And you know, it might be like, oh, there's a lot here to go. But I only knew like such a small sliver of it that like any bit more the door opened, it would have been just as daunting for me to have learned more about like 70s X-Men at the time. You know what I mean? Because I just knew so little about it. So this wouldn't have like I didn't know how overwhelming the whole motherfucker would be, like it's the Marvel Universe. So I just plunged in like, let's figure it out in no time. In the meantime, here's Unicorn.
This issue definitely fails the Jim Shooter test of you have to assume that if you're going to write an issue, certainly if it's got number 1 on the cover, it's a very good chance it's going to be someone's first. So, make sure that all the characters exposit their names, powers, and histories, do the Transformers thing. Yeah, this took a lot of research. Of note, the character I knew the most, the least about was probably Titanium Man, who I think was the earliest. And when he shows up as a credit card and he's got different pieces and he's got the Green Liberation Front, I was lost. And I live in an era where I could pull those issues up on the same device I was using to read Soviet Super Soldiers. But I can't imagine being in 1992 and not having access to any of that stuff. I mean, we're talking about, you wanted back issues. Maybe you had access to a Masterworks or something, but there was no real trade collection back then. So you'd read this and you'd either hope someone read and remembered a random Titanium Man comic or just be like, all right, this is what we're doing now. Let's see where it goes.
I was very fortunate. I had a resource that is unbelievable because our local morning DJ, for whatever reason, I would call and bother him. And he was into superheroes. And when I started getting into him, he's into comic books and Star Trek and stuff. I would just call him up and be like, and I remember now that you bring this up, I read some of these superstars who the fuck is Titanium Man? And he would just tell me what he knew about Titanium Man. He'd tell me, he was having a slow morning, he was fine, and I wound up working at that radio station when I was a junior. And that's, I was very interested in that kind of thing. I don't remember why I started calling this guy when I was in 6th grade. I don't know why he took pity on me and decided that he would talk to me, but God bless him. And he's a big Ben Johnson. If you ever listen to this, hope you're doing well. He runs a radio station for Cave City High School now in Cave City, Arkansas. The home of the world famous watermelons. And when I left them, I was like, you know about the Cave City watermelons? No, that's just something they say. It's not really world famous. But no, he would tell me. So I remember this issue now. I remember calling him up and being like, and he's like, why'd you buy that? That's stupid. He was like, Darry's he should have told you some of this stuff about it. But to be fair, if they had done the Jim Shooter thing, nothing else would have happened. It's 14 people in this comic book. So by the time all of them were introduced and we saw everything they could do, you just turn the page and be like, well, hope they figured it out.
Yeah, there's no way you could pack that into 64 pages and not get the story across.
The other side of Jim Shooter's thing, and it applies here, I don't disagree with him as a general rule, especially Jim Shooter's pre-narrow casting. Some things I think right after they're more boutique. They're more narrow. Cable would go from 50 channels to 120 to where you could have 300 now. This is the kind of thing that listen, it doesn't introduce everybody, but to be honest, it's not for everybody. We priced it at $3. It's a year and a half old already. It's talking about events that, have really already real world events that are happening in real time 2 years ago. So I think that Jim Shooter, well, I don't want to say he's wrong. I just think it's not a blanket rule. And in this case, it probably would have been more confusing in a way to have done such a thing because you would have dumped all the characters on it. As it's divided up, it's more like you're watching kind of a crime movie from the time, like True Romance or The Usual Suspects. It can be confusing, but it will come together. And I think that it would have been confusing in a bad way. And again, not to say that Jim Shooter doesn't know what he's talking about. He obviously knows just a smidge more about comic books than me.
I agree, but I actually have this issue with Fabian Nicieza. I've always had it. I'm a huge Thunderbolts fan, and Fabian takes over Thunderbolts when Kurt Busiek leaves. Thunderbolts starts in 97, so about 5 years after this comic comes out. And Nicieza always went out of his way to bring up the most ridiculous Marvel minutia. And as an adult, I would go back and reread the stuff and I'd be like, but none of this stuff is interesting. To go back to the Titanium Man thing, it's fine, don't assume everyone has access to that book, but you can also just ignore it. I feel like a lot of this stuff, you would have been more likely to get a Soviet Super Soldiers issue number 2 if you had just been like, you know what, most of this is nonsense. Most of these characters were never intended to interact with each other. I'm going to ignore all the parts that don't work and just push on and do something new. But, for whatever reason, Nicieza never lets a single iota of Marvel continuity fall by the wayside for better or worse. He's certainly not a bad writer, but sometimes it just kills me. Man, pretend no one read that and move on to the next. Give the people something new. Make them show up.
And this is spun out of Gruenwald's Captain America, who is also very known for never letting any bit of minutia go, for better or for worse. And sometimes I really like it. Yeah. Like in Cap Wolf, when like everyone who is a wolf person and Wolverine show up, because who's not a wolf. Wolverines aren't wolves. Who show up in the thing, you know, to like do wolf stuff. And I was like, oh, there are a lot more wolf guys in the Marvel Universe than I thought about. And Wolverine.
Oh, that's hilarious. All right.
We do the Cat Wolf podcast, which we will at some point. I'm just going to say that for like 3 minutes straight. Wolverines aren't wolves.
Perfect. Drill it in. All right. Part 1, the three-sided coin.
21 months ago, no one was talking about the dissolution of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, of military coups or nuclear buttons in the hands of barely experienced politicians. Everyone outside the boundaries of the monolithic communist nation were hoping upon hope that the democratic reforms being implemented in the world's largest country would work and freedom would soon ring across the USSR. Inside that country, a struggle of a different kind was being waged on a level beyond the comprehension of the regular working men and women. A war was being waged among the superhuman community, a war to determine how they would operate, who they would answer to, and what their priorities would be. It was a war like all wars, which would have winners and losers, heroic survivors, and remembered dead. Only the stakes were higher, because it was a war being waged among the super soldiers of the Soviet Union, walking weapons of destruction. And ironically, the first shot in that war was fired in the United States.
So we open the issue as Captain America watches as the unconscious bodies of Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Darkstar are taken back to a facility in their homeland of the USSR. After a couple of weeks, Iron Curtain and Concussion infiltrate the facility with the mutant Blind Faith, retrieving the still unconscious bodies of Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Darkstar. Shortly after finding their prized possession, now stolen, an enraged Colonel General Shadalov employs the assassin tracker cyborg Firefox to retrieve them. Sometime later, an awakened Darkstar is hiding in a remote mutant safe house cabin with fellow mutants Stencil, Iron Curtain, Concussion, and Mentak, while Blind Faith is away trying to secure a new safe house. Suddenly, they are attacked by Firefox. Darkstar and Stencil are able to escape through a Dark Force teleport, but Mentak, Concussion, and Iron Curtain are brutally killed. Near the Finland-USSR border, the Supreme Soviets are in action, taking down an environmental terrorist outpost. Shortly after Crimson Dynamo is notified the government wishes to have a talk with him, Colonel General Shadalov tells the Crimson Dynamo he needs to head to New York City and with the use of a device called the Matrix Retriever, find the card armor pieces of Boris Bolsky, the original Titanium Man. However, the Crimson Dynamo does not realize that Shadalov's operation is meant to actually vilify him. Colonel General Shadalov also is planning on releasing something called Project Spiral Doom in Leningrad. Regrouping in a city in the Siberian lowlands, Darkstar and Stencil have found Blind Faith, Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Cybercat hiding in a new safe house. And it isn't long, however, as government helicopters surround their small apartment demanding the mutants surrender. Now in Brooklyn, the Crimson Dynamo finds the facility housing the pieces of Titanium Man's cards and is able to piece them together. He also finds other stored cards there, and when he activates them, he finds they are the Green Liberation Front, a villainous group of disgruntled Vietnam War vets once led by the Titanium Man. Yeah, I had to pull that one off of some wiki.
Yeah, of course you did.
The GLF.
No offense, but who cares?
The GLF soon attacks the Crimson Dynamo, and in desperation, he activates Titanium Man's card, hoping to buy himself some time and possibly some help as well. Kind of like three stories going on here. We got our defectors who are trying to stay out of the way of Firefox and Colonel General Shadalov. And we also have, let's say two stories, then we have the Crimson Dynamo heading over to the U.S. to find Titanium Man.
I feel bad for the three mutants, Ursa Major, Darkstar, and Vanguard, who are just being shuffled about. Like, it's really unfair. It sort of really hits home. Like, this is obviously more horrendous in the real world, but people are utilized as diplomatic pieces all the time. You see what's going on with like Brittany Griner right now, who's stuck in Russia, and it's like, oh, it's going to take some kind of big concession to get her over. And that's what happened here. You know, some diplomats make some handshakes, and now you're a person of an autonomy, but you know, in this case, you know, you're a bear guy. But like, we're put you to sleep and you're going to go over here. And that we don't think of that as horrific, probably. And I didn't realize how horrific that was when I was reading it as a young person. Firefox, I love cyborgs. Let me say that, obviously. Very well on brand for me. He does have an eye that, like, he's got the targeting system and the red eye, but he has like one of the worst looking gun arms I've ever seen. Oh, I mean, like, honestly, like, he would have to hold his arm so like awkwardly the way it's drawn for it to work. You know what I mean? Because it's not like his arm comes out straight and it's a cannon. It's like he has like a gun with like a rifle butt that kind of goes. I mean, it's weird. Honestly, the Soviet Union didn't have a lot of money then, so I should probably not rag on them. They're doing the best they could with what they got.
Does this dude not look like Clint Eastwood on a bad day and just turned into a cyborg? I mean, he looks rough. He really does look rough.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, they don't have a lot of money, so he's probably in a lot of pain. He's also just apparently hanging out here, just waiting to shoot anybody who comes near. He's all like, hey, if you came to see Firefox, you either want to be dead or you want someone else dead. You're like, bro, calm down. It's very, like, dramatic of you.
Yeah, you don't have to be so dramatic, bro.
Also, like, I'm not a big Firefox fan because later, like, the Punisher, like, fucking owns him. Like, he shows up in the John Ostrander Punisher, and he's just, oh god, he's terrible. But honestly, it's another one of those things we're talking about. The Russian mobs are going to talk to the Frank's mob because he's leading the mob at the time, and so like Firefox is their enforcer. A really good thing to pull, I think, from Mark. Like, I don't know the dude who's like, oh, Firefox, got to get that one. Remember him, number one. I don't know that anybody did that, but that's a neat way to put that in without hammering it over your head, like Darry was complaining about. It's really neat that like this secret KGB plot is to like make the Crimson Dynamo attack America and look bad. Hasn't he done that like a trillion times? That's what he does. Like, how is this going to make it look bad? Crimson Dynamo went over there and does the thing he always does. Like, you know what I mean? Like, dogs shit on the grass in the park. What the fuck? I don't understand how I guess maybe because Glasnost was happening and stuff, this was a bad look. Also, I remember being grossed out by the unicorn in like later parts.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I don't here. But I remember asking my mom, for whatever reason, I'd also asked my mom about like superheroes, and she didn't know anything, but she knew a little, so like I would ask her, and I was like, who's Titanium Man? She's like, it's the Wing Song, Magneto and Titanium Man. And that's true. There is a Wing Song, Crimson Dynamo's in it, but she knew he had fought Iron Man, but that's all she knew about it. She's like, oh, he fought Iron Man, and Paul McCartney wrote a song about it. Way to go, Titanium Man. I never had a song written about me by a Beatles. So congrats.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The one thing that really stuck with me in this first part is Firefox like killing Iron Curtain by shoving his I assume his grenade launcher or whatever, some type of explosive round into Iron Curtain's mouth and then exploding him from the inside. That was rough. I mean, he's taking people out pretty brutally here. Like I said, brutal's the word.
Yeah, they really get him over like really quickly that he's like unstoppable. But what's funny is I remember reading this and being like, oh, that's horrific at the time. And he's mocking him the whole time. Yeah. And then like maybe a month later, I read a Wizard magazine. People got to write in their own heroes for a little bit. Like it was, I don't know, like, there'd be two of them and they draw them. And or a hero or a villain. This guy wrote in a villain who had killed Tough Guy. And you know how he killed Tough Guy? Tough Guy was invulnerable. He shot a grenade down his throat. So anyhow, I was like, this is a thing. And then I remember seeing it on a couple other things. Why was shooting a grenade down someone's throat a trope in the early 90s? I feel like it happened in like every Image comic except the Max.
Yeah. Probably.
Anyhow, sorry to commandeer that, but yeah.
No, perfect. I like it. All right, Darry, tell me what you thought here of this first part.
I like the first part because it's a lot of setup. I was put off when I started reading this thing because the cover makes it seem as if, okay, so the Soviet Union has fallen or is in the process of falling. Things are bad. So I look at the cover and I think, oh, okay, all of the Russian superheroes, they're going to come together. They're going to, there's a time of need. There's going to be some big bad guy who's taking advantage of this. They're going to do so. And none of that happens. Instead, it's like, it's a Cold War espionage movie. It's a political drama, and I wasn't expecting that because you could almost take the story, the plot of the 64-page one shot that came out 4 years before Marvel declared bankruptcy, and like put it in its own continuity, because it's all about like the Russian politics of super science. It's got a Siberian city you've never seen before. It's got characters named after the Russian space. It's got a lot of good stuff, and it's just everyone just screwing each other over for like these tiny inches of land and gain, and it just like really hit home. It's like, okay, this sounds like geopolitics of a state going through transition. I enjoyed the hell out of it because I wasn't expecting it. Again, I expected like, you know, some ancient god to show up somewhere and all these superheroes having to come together and have a very traditional battle. But, you know, Nicieza really said, no, I'm going to show you something a little bit more nuanced. And to throw in, you know, the disenfranchised mutants who had been in, I have not read X Factor Annual #1, but I certainly recognize Darkstar and her little brother there. It's like, oh, good. You know, you're acknowledging these people who are hated, but also when they have something to contribute, the state's like, oh, great. Well, now we own you. We're not even going to let you go to America and get the heck out of our way. So I really enjoyed this first part. And again, it was more a surprise than anything else.
If memory serves, when I talked to Angel Medina, like this was actually supposed to be released like 2 years before it, you know, like, and that would explain like, you know, why it has that kind of feel, because again, that's at the time we were seeing like the Hunt for Red October, the America miniseries that was like with a K on ABC. You know, this was very like sexy stuff because we were going to win the Cold War. Way to go. The October Guard was going to join G.I. Joe finally. Lex Luger and Hulk Hogan had finally vanquished Nikolai Volkov and Nikita Koloff. Done. So like, so I think that's part of why it has that feel. And I'm into that stuff too. You're absolutely right. Like, you are also right, because I stole this comic because that's what I thought was going to happen, was like all these guys were going to get together. And I'm also like a sucker for like analog guys. I was like, oh, that's their Captain America. That's their Vision. That's their Thor. You know, so like, yeah, when you see this cover, that's what you think is going to happen. And it's a pleasant surprise that it doesn't go that way.
Jesse, you mentioned before, and I just want to make sure that everyone knows, you mentioned a character called Cybercat, who I did not know about before I read this, but I want to point out it's spelled cyber like the place, like Siberia, and I thought that was one of the best puns because I kept reading it. I was like, that can't possibly be this character's name, and I looked it up, and it's like, yeah, he's the Cybercat of Cyber Force. And I was just like, oh man, you know what? Yeah. I love the 90s, even 30 years later, and I'm having a good chuckle at this. So thank you, everyone involved.
All right, let's get into part 2. The dissection of a surrender. As soon as Titanium Man is released from his card form, he immediately attacks the members of the GLF, giving the Crimson Dynamo some time. But he soon sees that Bolsky is not himself, acting erratically and aggressively, bringing down the whole building and killing the GLF in the process. As the police arrive, Crimson Dynamo has to lure Bolsky out to sea before more innocent lives are lost in Titanium Man's swath of destruction. Over the sea, Crimson Dynamo activates the Matrix Retriever, turning Titanium Man back into a card and storing him on his armor, heading back to Russia to meet with Colonel General Shatilov. When he arrives, he realizes these events in the United States have ruined his reputation. Again, Shatilov explains he only ruined the Crimson Dynamo's reputation. Dimitri's fine. Just leave me the armor. You're free to go. In Leningrad, Project Spiral Doom has been unleashed. Unknowingly, the Supreme Soviets investigate a nearly destroyed part of the city, tracing the destruction to the insane evil that is Unicorn. As they engage in battle, Phantasma is finally able to knock him unconscious, and they take him to a research facility. When the researchers remove the Unicorn's helmet, they find a disturbing, at least it was for me, third eye on a stalk in the middle of his forehead that is the source of his powers. Shortly, it's scary looking.
It looks like a dick.
Shortly.
I don't know why they were like, listen, we got to make Unicorn badass. What if he had a dick eye?
Right in the middle of his forehead. Shortly, the Unicorn escapes, but two of the scientists, Zoya Vasilovna, and Arkady Tagai.
Better at the start. You started getting Spanish.
Fucking shit.
But when you started, I liked it.
We'll just go with Zoya and Arkady. Merge into one being. They merge into one being called the Synthesizer. And yes, this is its first appearance. So Synthesizer is set to try and stop Unicorn. And that's the end of that story right there. Back in the Siberian lowlands, Ursa Major, Vanguard, Darkstar, and Cybercat cripple the Soviet Union government helicopters that have come after them. And soon, Darkstar teleports them away again to a mutant safe house system on the Black Sea. And as a few days pass, they are found again, this time by a government team led by Firefox. They can't shake them. Firefox is just about on their tail every single time. Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. He's got the eye. And that's the dissection of a surrender. It's the end of part 2. So
one of the things I really like about these characters in general is one of you guys mentioned analogs before. And it's so obvious, reading this comic that none of the people beneath the masks are ones with storied history. Like, we're watching the 5th Crimson Dynamo turn into the 6th Crimson Dynamo. There's been 4 or 5 Red Guardians. This one isn't even the one who was in the Black Widow movie played by Hopper. And I think that's really funny because it's this idea of like, well, okay, the superhero is basically an American concept. The rest of the world wants it. Within the Marvel Universe, the Russian version of Cap and Iron Man and even Thor to a lesser extent are, I won't say knockoffs, but they keep having to try over and over to get him right. And I kind of love that because it's like, well, who's important? The Crimson Dynamo, the armor, not the person beneath it. And you see this like series of increasingly less interesting people. And I think that's a cool parallel to like our Iron Man, who's like, oh no, everyone just calls him Tony Stark. Like, you don't even, Iron Man is just this thing he does sometimes, but it's like you call him Tony Stark. And I like that. I feel like that's one of the reasons that, these characters, whether they're the Soviet super soldiers, the Protectorate, the Winter Guard, they keep going through all these versions because they're imitating a thing they don't fundamentally understand. And I thought that was really interesting in the second part as you see the disparate groups come together. Like, part of me is like, oh yes, come together, deal with this Colonel General, whatever, free people, liberty and life in pursuit of good things. But that's never going to happen because, of course, it's not. You're imitating something you don't fundamentally understand. So, again, I thought it was this tragedy in motion, and I couldn't stop reading it, even if I didn't particularly care about any of the characters.
These characters, you're right, they don't have a lot of history. One of the things they're doing really well for me is allusions to this history. Like, apparently, Perrin, like, he really, unlike Donald Blake here, who controls the transformation, it's the god who controls the transformations there. They're constantly being like, oh, I'd like to, see my wife, I'd like to do things, but because they're seen as instruments of the state as opposed to American superheroes, which we have a weird relationship with the state here, but in this, superheroism is a much more individualistic thing here. So we promise you won't be pairing that long, but they don't really care, and you can tell they don't care. And it's neat to see that illusion. Like, later on, you'll get to see or you're talking about the synthesizer, and they're like, I guess we got to reveal our secret, which would lead you to believe that the synthesizer's been doing Soviet shit for a while. Like, so on the low. I wish there was more of Firefox, like, actually doing, like, trailing stuff and not just putting a gun in somebody's head, tell me where they are. Because it just seems like at one point he does, I think it's in this part where he's like, tell me where they are. It's like, I don't know. Too bad. Kills him. But apparently he can still just figure out where they are. They try and give him the Goldberg treatment, and it just doesn't work. Because at the end of the day, it's the Marvel Universe. I've seen Deathlock. I've seen Cable. I've seen in the DC Universe, they've had Cyborg and Deadshot. I've seen a lot of guys with gun arms who, like, fucking have cool eyes. And I'm not saying Firefox doesn't have a cool eye, but I am saying that, like, he just shows up and kills people. I don't get to see anything other than that until he gets aced, which is really cool. It makes, when he shows up and finds these guys, it becomes less threatening than it should, if that makes sense. I think this is also the part when he shows up in the last at this safe house and the mutants there, they're like, you guys have been making it worse for us. And yeah. I love where Vanguard, like, picks that guy up and he's like, listen, you can do 3 things. You can like stay and fight, or you can run and hide, or you can sit around and wait to die. And it reminded me of this great song. And the lyrics of it are like, I don't have to do a goddamn thing but sit around and wait to die. It's Living the Dream. And I can't remember, for the life of me, I can't remember. Russell Stinson? That's not it. That's not the guy. Sturgill Simpson, I believe, is the guy. And it's a great song. It reminded me of that so much. Like, yeah, you don't have to do anything but let, this low-rent Kmart cyborg kill you if you want. I mean... I think this is emblematic everywhere, but it would have really been emblematic in a country going through such transition. People who took action would be vilified to an extent. But actually, like Vanguard's like, no, we're the ones fucking taking care of business. If you want to just keep hiding, like, that's fine, but don't tell me we're not going to fight. Of course, it's easier for him to say because, man, he's got some cool ass power. You know what I mean? Like, right. That's the thing, too. When the guys are running away, they seem like helpless. Like, Iron Curtain should have been able to do something. Concussion should have been able to do something. But when Ursa Major, Vanguard, and Darkstar show up, now all of a sudden, like, we can do things. And speaking of songs, there's a great song I like too called Destination Ursa Major by Superdrag. And I remember I discovered this album around like 96, 97. And I remember hearing that song on the album and being like, that bear guy. You know, it was probably the first time I thought about Soviet Super Soldiers, at least a year or two. I was like, that bear guy. I think this idea gets explored more later in Miller's Ultimates, that these are persons of...
Yes.
Like, to the Soviet Union, these guys aren't, like you're saying, they're not heroes and they're not people. They're instruments of the state. And if the state says, go save Leningrad from this weird unicorn, great. But if the state also said, invade the Ukraine, that's what they'd have to do. Yeah. Their analog is the Avengers, superficially, powers-wise. But they're really probably more like the Imperial Guard in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that too, because, you know, you said superheroes have a weird relationship with the state, and it's true. Many of Avengers arcs are dealing with, you know, their liaison or who oversees them or who's in control of them. But then, across the street with the Ultimates, it's the exact opposite. They, for most of their storylines, they're funded by the U.S. government. S.H.I.E.L.D. is basically Department of Homeland Security, and most of the conflict comes from that. But also, there was a mini-series called Ultimate Nightmare, which brought back all of the characters we are discussing, except they were dark horror characters as envisioned by or re-envisioned by Warren Ellis. And that was my actual introduction to most of these characters, because like I said, I didn't pick this up on the rack. So the first time I saw Red Guardian, Unicorn, a couple of the other characters, they were being like messed up horror characters. And I won't give away the ending for someone who hasn't read Ultimate Nightmare, which I'm sure is like 20 years old at this point, but it's got a surprise ending. So anyway, I completely agree. I was reading this and I was like, oh, there are so many themes that are going to be explored later post 9/11 when we get to the Ultimates, when we get to questioning if it's a good thing that superheroes don't respond to the government. And then, of course, the guy who creates the Ultimates, Mark Miller, is going to come back with Civil War and say, well, now they have to. And now you're going to see a pretty cool fight for separate issues. So,
right. Another good analog for these guys, too, and maybe even better in a way, would be, maybe not for every group here because there's several different groups going, but the Suicide Squad. There's a lot of, interscene warfare between departments that theoretically should be on the same side, that in theory have similar, if not the same goals, but they don't like each other. So they're always trying to pull this string or that string to get this guy onto this team or off this guy or make him look bad. So he's got to do this because we want that. So I think it also has a lot in common there. Maybe not the teams themselves, the concept, not themselves, but a lot of the tropes and concepts that are utilized within it. It really goes very well with the Suicide Squad collection.
You're absolutely right. One of the best things about the John Ostrander Suicide Squad run from the 80s was just the internal bickering. Like in real life, we know the FBI and CIA are always like sniping at each other, and a lot of that was in a comic. Like they had Checkmate, they had Task Force X, they had Argent, they had a whole bunch of other stuff.
Project Adam.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they even brought in the Keene Act from Watchmen. And it was all like, who's got jurisdiction? Who's going to deal with Karak? Who's going to deal with all this nonsense? And, watching Amanda Waller or someone else basically like flex their muscles and send a bunch of Z-level supervillains into the fire was the best part, because it's like, are they coming back? Is someone going to get in trouble if they come back? Like, I love that stuff because A, you don't know who's coming back because all these characters are disposable, but B, at the same time, that's not even the main conflict. The main conflict is all the stuff behind the scenes. So I love that. I love political intrigue.
I'm a big fan too. And like, much like here, the way it will wind up in the third act, another one of my favorite things on the Suicide Squad is when one guy on the Suicide Squad, for whatever reason, no matter who's there, there's always one guy who like the implant wouldn't work on or whatever. And I remember like the time Black Adam was in it and he just ripped this fucking thing out. It was like, all right, so what are we really going to do, guys? And it's always funny too to see these people who are like, in charge of their little kingdoms. And there's no more tyrannical an emperor than the emperor of a tiny kingdom, especially one that's like foisted within a bunch of others. And it's great to see them get their comeuppance sometimes too. And, you know, when somebody's like, actually, you're not quite as powerful as you think. You think that you moved all the chess pieces right, but I just knocked the board over and set the house on fire.
So as far as shocking moments in comic book history, I'm going to say that the unmasking of the unicorn really disturbed me.
Yes.
I didn't know anything about the unicorn coming into this. I saw him running around. He's got, he's shooting stuff out of his head. And I'm like, oh, he's got some kind of beam that he can shoot out of the... I had no idea I was going to see that. No clue.
Yeah, who thinks they're going to turn the page and see a dick eye and it's called Soviet Super Soldiers? But it looks like he grew like one of those fucking new age third eyes, but there's a penis behind it, and it ends in an eyeball, and it's crazy. I remember when I saw this, I turned the page real fast. I was in 7th grade. It's not like I didn't know what dicks were, and it's not like I hadn't, wasn't like super prudish, but this was just weird. It's unsettling.
Darry, did you know this was going to happen? Did you have any idea that this was underneath the mask? Did you have any clue?
No, not at all. I had a very limited understanding of the character of Unicorn. I don't even know if this is the original Unicorn. I tried to figure that out today because I knew he went back to the 60s, but I was like, I don't remember seeing him all that often. So I think this might almost be a later edition or something.
There is some weird, weren't there, and you might have read a little bit more of the wiki than I did, but I remember reading stuff about how like he started, I don't know if he started to mutate or if I know he had cell deterioration. That was one of the things I remember them saying. So I don't know.
Deteriorating.
No, it looks like he's.
It looks like the opposite. Like he's growing an appendage he shouldn't have. That's not deterioration. He's got that evil, stupid grin on his face too. Like, it's not helping. Like I need, his other eyes are closed. The dick eyes open. I don't need this shit.
I like this too because I like the fact that everyone in this book has like not really a great superpower, and everyone at the top, everyone who believes they're in a position of power is trying to get them, is trying to like pull them in and be like, nah, you work for me, you work for me, you work for me. But it's always like with a catch. It's like the storm god doesn't really respect your authority and is only there because you've promised him like booze and to hang out with him.
You get to smash stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And you keep replacing the other characters. People keep making fun of Ursa Major. They keep telling him he smells when he turns into a bear. Like these are characters that you'd almost see in like The Boys or something. So I think it's funny that like the unicorn shows up and he's done a lot of damage. He's killed a lot of people. They're like, oh man, we have to get him part of Spiral Doom or whatever's going on. But you finally get him in a lab and you take his dumb helmet off and he's got this third eye that just kills everyone. And I thought that was like emblematic of the entire thing. It's like, yeah, you want this thing you can't even control. It's not going to help you get what you want anyway. You don't even realize that.
It's weird though, because like Ursa Major and Vanguard and Darkstar are treated very seriously elsewhere. The characters here don't care, and I wonder if that's also part of like the culture. Like, well, I'm not gonna fuck it, like fuck you guys. You tried to leave, now you're back. Whatever. You smell bad, right? Like, I wonder if that's just people who feel a little spurned because those exiles feel like these guys should have helped them more and they haven't. And you can talk about that inclination one way or another, but I wonder if a little bit of that is in regard to their feelings of betrayal.
That's a really good point. Actually, I hadn't considered that, but yeah, you're right. I mean, if you think of the size of Russia and how some people are really secluded, right? And obviously there's all these other states that are declaring their independence at this time. Some of them's got to be like, wait a second, you were an X-Man, you were a champion, you like Captain America's phone number. You didn't come back here and help us. Like you could have shuttled us through the Dark Force. You could have gotten us with the, you could have done all these great things. What did you do? You went to Los Angeles and you abandoned us. Like at least Colossus came back for his sister. It's like, come on, guys.
Right. But Colossus has faced some of that stuff. And Omega Red has like taunted him about it. Like Omega Red somehow, like, oh, look at me, I'm really good. Me, why can't you be a good guy? Like, hold on, Omega Red here. I feel like these folks, not just for being Russian, but also mutants. These three guys are mutants, and you've left these mutants to die. You've also seen like the Morlocks accuse the X-Men of the same thing. Like, it's pretty great. It's pretty great that Jean Grey looks like an incredible supermodel. In the meantime, I have two dick eyes, making me more horrific than the unicorn.
Anything left on the table there that you guys wanted to bring up before I get into part 3? Here we go. So, naked before tomorrow. Returning to the battle at the safe house on the Black Sea, Stencil is able to absorb the minds of the attacking helicopter pilots, defeating them pretty easily. Vanguard confronts Firefox, where he quickly and violently removes all of his cyborg implants. That eye went away, Dean. I don't know how distraught you were there, but yeah, he removed that eye pretty quickly. However, Blind Faith convinces him, please do not kill him. They leave Firefox and escape to another safe house. And they are all over the place in these safe houses.
Russia's a big place.
Right. It is. In Leningrad, Unicorn is able to get a shot in on Synthesizer, but turns around to find Titanium Man pointing his massive shoulder gun at him, advising him he has an offer that Unicorn cannot refuse. Back at a Russian lab, they have perfected removing the Titanium Man armor into credit card form without affecting Bolsky in the process. In a separate room, Colonel General Shatilov speaks to a wounded Firefox and explains he has put together the team of Unicorn, the Titanium Man, Firefox, and himself as the new Crimson Dynamo to return the Soviet Republic to the great days of Stalin.
Great.
The Supreme Soviets meet up with Colonel General Shelkov, different general, Colonel General Shelkov, and are soon joined by Dmitri, who advises them he has been separated from the Crimson Dynamo armor. However, they have developed a new suit and name for him, that of Airstrike. Sputnik would also now like to be known as Vostok, and soon they are revealed as a new team, the People's Protectorate. In a distant home, Blind Faith attempts to determine the next step for his team of exiles, which include Vanguard, Darkstar, Cybercat, Ursa Major, and Stencil. Whatever it may be, he absolutely knows it ends with the overthrow of the Soviet socialist government.
Yeah, well, the economy beat him to that one. Even in the dying days of the Soviet Union, there were still a good number of hardliners who thought it could somehow come back. And that's why there was a coup. And, it would have been late 1991, I believe, right when I was going back to school. They kidnapped Gorbachev and said there was a new, we're in charge now. Boris Yeltsin led a bunch of people to, what's their thing called? The Duma, I want to say. And their parliament essentially, and, was like, hey, we're gonna have civil resistance, and the coup didn't last. So yeah, this is a little late for that. But if this had come out in 1990 or early 91, or even at the same time as this, it would have seemed more timely. Although I don't know what happens with these guys next. I mean, I know Firefox becomes a mob enforcer, but I wonder what happened to this dude as the Crimson Dynamo. Also, Airstrike, really cool armor. I like that.
As far as resolution goes for the story, what it felt like was, it really does feel like you're setting more stuff up.
Right.
It feels like there should be a lot more that comes after this. We've got a team that's ready to go up against the government. We've got a government team that's put together that's going to try and bring things back to the way things were. In the middle of that, I guess you got the Supreme Soviets who are just serving their state. So
the People's Protectorate?
Yeah, my bad. The People's Protectorate.
They have a million names. And honestly, Soviet Super Soldiers is the best one. That rolls off the tongue. It sounds good. I get that there's no more USSR, so you have to come up with something different. But People's Protectorate doesn't sound awesome. Winter Guard over People's Protectorate.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I forgot from the second part, that's where Vanguard just brutalizes Firefox, right? Just crushes his gun arm, and rips his cyborg eye out. It's amazing. And I remember this is when I'm first getting into comic books. This is code approved, y'all. So it is violent and everything, but I hadn't seen a lot of the Spawn stuff or Youngblood stuff, which would make this look much tamer. But I remember between Unicorn's dick eye and that moment, I was super horrified. I do think this is definitely, like you said, it wraps up very neatly without a conclusion, if that's something you don't normally say. But there's not really a conclusion, but all the loose ends in this thing are sort of tied up. Very, very interesting to see Vostok and how he's kind of doing the same thing Vision did. He's becoming more of a person as opposed to a machine. That's why he wants to be known as Vostok, which is the first manned space flight, versus Sputnik, which is just the first, satellite or what have you.
Right. Just straight up machine, right?
Straight up machine, right. So He's growing as a being, as it were. I really, really enjoy the hopefulness in the exiles after everything that's happened to them, after R.I.P. Iron Curtain, who was blown from the inside out. They still have a lot of hope.
The concussion guy had his hands blown off. Remember
Hands
that?
blown off.
I know,
right,
dude.
Yeah. And then Firefox is like, what are you going to do now that you don't have any hands? Kick you in the balls? That's what? No, he didn't do that.
He's just going to look at his stubs.
That's what you do, too. I'm talking like a badass, but you'll notice from the Skype video, I'm in possession of both of my hands. So... True. It's easy for me to say, you kick him in the balls if you got shot in the hand. Probably just going to look at your bloody hands. And
you are. Yeah.
What else would you do? But I like that hopefulness. I think they've done a really good job. Like, if this had somehow gone on, what I would have wanted was for the Exiles and the People's Protectorate to somehow, joined up together. They could do a USSR Secret Wars, where, where, these disparate guys have to fight. And much like the mutants in the Secret Wars took their own side. That's the analog I might have utilized in that. Also, we talk a lot about Russia, and people use the Russia and USSR, Soviet Union interchangeably, but that's not true. The Union of Soviet Social Republics was made up of a lot of different republics, like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Georgia, Moldova, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus. I don't have to name them. Y'all know that. But it would have been interesting as this went forward to have seen how that would have impacted this, because this book was going to be something that had a lot of skullduggery, black ops, cool shit, and that would have opened it up for a lot of it, because you're talking about you go from one big nuclear power to 3 nuclear powers. It changes the whole status quo for Eastern Europe, which changes everything for Western Europe. You could have wound up with a really cool Turkmenistani hero or what have you. And what would that mean? Because that's the other thing. These republics are a lot different. Like Ukraine is a lot different than Uzbekistan. We would have gotten to see what that meant to be a hero in those places versus Russia, versus Uzbekistan, versus Armenia, etc. There would have been a lot for them to play with if they had been able to go forth. But all in all, it comes to the conclusion it needs to get it to where, if you're interested in this, you could write letters and stuff, maybe get a series going. That does not happen. But I would have bought more of it, or stolen more of it, most likely. But I would have read it. That's what's important.
Why do the Russian issues keep disappearing from Walmart shelves? That damn Dean Compton.
Walking in with a hammer and sickle shirt. I don't know. Who can it
What is going on around here?
We're all looking for the guy who did this.
Yeah, it's funny in a lot of ways, because all of the pieces are left in a place where the next writer could have picked up the baton. Nastasia takes all these disparate parts that Groenwald and Bob Layton and other creators had kind of put into place and said, well, I'm going to kind of throw them all together and see what comes out of it. You have new teams that are kind of set in place that don't necessarily depend on the Soviet Union. So I assume he was assuming that other creators were going to use them. But yeah, to your guys' point, none of these characters ever show up again. And when they do, they're as different as they were last time. So it's just kind of funny, because it feels like there should be another issue. You did all the build up, you got all your pieces in the right way. Well, now you actually have to execute that. You got everything in place, and now they got to go. And then that doesn't happen, and then you don't see these guys anymore. And it's almost like, wow, you did all the legwork, and I feel bad you never got to go anywhere with it. So I was looking for that, but I looked, and really, the next time they show up, they're the Winter Guard. They're still the Winter Guard. And none of these plot lines really go anywhere. So I kind of felt bad, but at the same time, you do get a story in this one shot. It delivers on what it says. All the characters are in a place where, I won't say they're comfortable, but their arc in this issue has been dealt with. The villain's been kind of put aside for a while, and future conflict is coming. But you got your money's worth, which is good too. But I just felt like there was more story to be told.
Right.
So, as far as Russians go, this touched a lot of guys from the Soviet Union. Is there anybody from the Marvel Universe that, you didn't see? You're hey, why wasn't this person involved? Or this, group of people?
As far as Russian superheroes go?
Yeah, or anybody, why wasn't, Colossus's family involved? That was one for me.
I mean, that would be
and I also thought about the Gremlin from the Hulk mythos.
Oh, yeah.
And also that guy from the Carnage issues at Madison Square Garden who pulled the knife out, he looked Eastern European. He was ready to go. He should have been in this. He was ready. I'm telling you. But no, for real, there were a few Russians that I thought it was interesting that there's no Gremlin, there's no mention of the Abomination, there's no mention of Colossus's family.
was the Red Ghost.
Oh yeah,
that's a really the Red Ghost. Yeah, great point. And he's also like a hardliner. Like that was his whole stick, was like he loved communism for whatever reason. But like he was really
gave him all those monkey brides, You said that, and one immediately popped into mind. The early Marvel days, or at least the Marvel in the 60s, most of the villains were Russian because that's who you fought at the time, right? It's like James Bond. It's like they all had generic Russian or that part of the world origins. And, a lot of that's been, I won't say retcon, but ignored as part of the storyline as it goes on. Abomination's now English in the movies.
Right.
The Rhino's got like a normal mook name. But the one character who's really kept it up, who I'm a big fan of, is the Chameleon. He was notoriously a Russian agent. No one even knew if he was Russian because until they gave him a backstory of being Kraven's half brother, no one had ever seen what he really looked like. So for years, he was this Cold War horror story that the agents would tell each other, and that was consistent all the way through. He had some interactions with Peter Parker's parents and early SHIELD agents and all that other stuff. So I was kind of hoping that he would pop up, the faceless man, the ultimate boogeyman. But again, I just always want to see more Spider-Man characters. So
yeah, I was going to say this probably was just one of those things. This is a very more Captain America centric, thing, and maybe they didn't want to deal with the Spider Office. They should have dropped the name though.
Yeah.
They should have at least been like, at least mentioned the Chameleon or something. That would have been really cool. You're right. That's a great pick. For me, like I said, I think it's the Gremlin because he hides out in those kind of fortresses where like half this stuff took place anyway.
All right. Anything else? Anything left unsaid? It's Soviet super soldiers, guys. We did it.
If you see it, pick it up. It's not bad. It's probably not going to cost you a lot. It wasn't on the app, so I don't know. I don't know if it was reprinted anywhere. I certainly haven't seen the back issue in many years, but if you see it, grab it. It's not a bad way to spend a few minutes.
Yeah. The cover alone is honestly worth $1.
Cover's great. It really is. As soon as I saw it, it was like one of those like just jam covers. Just if they were born in Russia and they're a Marvel character, throw them on there.
Right. It'll probably get reprinted in an Epic collection at some point, like one of the Captain Americas, maybe an Iron Man, maybe even an X-Men, but at some point whenever, because that's where they tend to throw this stuff in. Like, I picked up the Avengers West Coast Epic collection, and it started with Emperor Doom. Like, this is like volume 3.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. I mean, it has a bunch of Avengers West Coast. Wonder Man is the central guy in the story. But
it's a Wonder Man story.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, all right, well, great. So probably get thrown in somewhere where it can fit in.
All right. Well, all right. That is going to bring our discussion of Soviet. So be it. It's the Soviets. The Soviet super soldiers issue is coming to a close. So with that being said, Dean Compton, tell us about the Unspoken Decade and what's been going on over there. We'll get some plugs in here.
We're doing the Unspoken Decade, unspokendecade.com on Facebook. We're still talking about 90s comics. I've been posting a little more on Twitter lately, so go look at that. I really am going to try and write something before the end of the year, mostly to make Darry feel good because he misses my writing a lot. He's always sending me notes. He's like, "Oh man, could you please write something?" I'm going to try and write and I think that's enough time. Like normally I'm about to write something. We get something done by December. Let's see if we can do that. But in the meantime, you can find these podcasts and stuff at the Unspoken Decade. Simbi Fan writes a lot of great stuff for the website, and we're just always having a lot of fun talking about 90s comics, laughing with and at them and enjoying their greatness.
Yeah.
Or like their own.
We're having a good time. That's the main thing. I will tell you, Darry, it's good to have you back once again. Thank you very much for coming back. Can't wait to have you back on for Dean. Do we have anything off the top of your head we're going to be covering next?
Ghost Rider 2099, which will probably be 4 to 6 issues because we'll do the first story arc.
That's next. That's up next.
That's what I have on this list.
Okay. For myself, hey, got all sorts of podcasts in the fire. I mean, Dean, we've got Star Trek, The Next Generation, and X-Men that's got to drop at some point.
Yeah.
I know that I just recorded and dropped it was me, Chris Armstrong, and Evan Bevins. We talked Sleepwalker, Color Blindness. That just dropped today. No, yesterday. It dropped on Wednesday. Source Material Comics Podcast is going to be dropping a discussion on Thor, Goddess of Thunder. First volume of that should be dropping here pretty soon. And I'm not really going to go on and on about all the other. I mean, dude, we got so much stuff in the can. It's great. I love it. I love actually having things that I need to edit and could just edit those and get them out there and gives myself some time to breathe a little bit. So I guess with that being said, for Darry Waite, for Dean Compton, I am Jesse Starcher. We'll be talking to you again soon here on the Unspoken Issues podcast. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Rattlich and Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.